Hi, CistReactZ. How you doing? Did you know that 70% of you guys are not subscribed? Also, did you know that I am living in those 70% walls right now? And if you want me to stop, you'll hit that subscribe button? What is up, you awesome kisters? This is CistReactZ, guys. Today we're reacting to Game Theory, FNAF, Burn Them All, Ultimate Timeline. So make sure you guys subscribe to the Game Theorist, hit that like button, and comment down below. All right, let's get into this bop.
Hello, Internet.
So what, is this the final part?
Welcome to Game Theory and page 20 of our final FNAF timeline.
Page 20 is crazy.
Last time we covered William Afton's rise as a serial killer.
Paragraphs about
FNAF
FNAF fit into one page.
Caused him to make one fateful promise that would ultimately serve as his driving force for decades. I will put you back together. Fueled by grief and obsession, Afton would lose himself in work and drinks. One night in a fit of rage, he lashes out against Henry's young daughter, Charlie, his first murder. This moment becomes the first domino to fall in a long sequence of events that ultimately destroys William's life and the lives of those around him. That one murder gives Afton a taste for blood, resulting in the deaths of 10 more children across two different
I like how these videos are working.
Children go on to possess animatronics.
He's like making
Afton
a story
his
with his theories and stuff.
And the potential solution for bringing his son back to life. The need to learn more
and
about
what we
this
already know
miraculous
too.
power leads him to produce the Funtime animatronics, as well as their capture devices. Robots designed to bring kids to him for experimentation and collection of more remnant. Except there was one thing that he didn't account for: his daughter's curiosity. He made the robots too appealing, and it would cost.
Sounds like a skill issue, honestly. Me personally, I wouldn't let that happen to me.
Afton was more desperate and crazed than ever, returning to defunct pizzerias to steal the possessed metal still living inside their walls. What he didn't account for, though, were the ghosts, forcing him to pay for the sins of his past. When last we left him, William was spring-locked, bleeding to death behind a secret wall. Gone, but
bro was in there for 30 years.
Today we're finishing up chapter 2 of our story, wrapping up the Afton era. Over the next 6 pages, we switch our focus to our main character of the franchise, Mike, a young boy dealing with the fallout of a stupid childhood decision with tragic consequences. A young man whose life is best described as collateral damage, caught in the blast radius of William's whirlwind of destruction. Now, before we begin, let me just rip off the band-aid now. We won't be finishing the timeline today.
Oh, wow.
I'm sorry, I wanted to.
I thought he was going to do a sponsor, so I was getting ready to skip.
AR and Security Breach wound up taking me an additional 9 pages of script. And I've already made you wait long enough for this part, so I just had to make the executive call to break this one up into 2. Don't worry, that part is already written. It is already recorded.
Episode 3, part 2.
Being edited. It is a hefty episode.
I have forgotten
so mark it on your
sleep.
calendar. That one's actually going to be going live on March 25th. It's also coming complete with a live
So after
talk
next
back
week?
where we go back over everything from the past couple episodes, as well as having ourselves some very special guests. So
Oh, snap.
overall, that
FNAF is
going to
be
a lot
there.
of fun. Fair warning, though, the
John
conclusions
FNAF is gonna be there, bro.
Security Breach, whew, they are controversial. I feel good about them. Like, I think that we've locked in on a lot of the answers here, but they're gonna raise a lot of discussion. Let's just say that you're either gonna love that episode or hate it. I don't really think there's gonna be much in between on that one. Anyway, without any further ado, let's cover a chunk of the timeline that's a lot less controversial. Let's meet Mike.
The Afton era continued.
William still wasn't back. Weird. Michael knew his father sometimes traveled for work, disappearing for days on end, but usually there was some sort of notice, a phone call, a post-it, something. It's not like Michael and his father were close, far from it, but as a household of 2 suffering men coping with years of tragedy and loss, there was at least some element of communication between the two of them. They were united by a name and a shared pain. This time, though, things felt different. William had left nothing. His absence was longer. There were no check-ins, no updates, just silence. Something had happened. If there was one thing Michael knew about his father, it was that he had contingencies, safety checks, backup plans. His father was a careful and guarded man. He held his cards close to his chest, and as such, William had prepared him in the event that something like this ever happened. Normally, his father kept his home office locked, but in the event of an unexpected, prolonged absence, Michael had been instructed to enter his father's office and look behind an empty set of shelves mounted in the corner of the room. Rolling his eyes, Michael entered the office. Never fully understood how William was able to spend so many hours of his days locked up in here. There was just nothing to do. Most of this place was empty. He dragged himself over to the shelf in the corner, expecting to find an emergency contact list, a family safety deposit box. But what he actually found there was completely unexpected.
Father, it's me, Michael.
The evidence.
I found it. It was right where you said it would be.
The shelf swung open and revealed a giant industrial elevator, one that led straight down into an underground bunker. But that was impossible.
My brain was somewhere else in the timeline. I don't know why I said the evidence.
To an enormous underground science lair? It didn't make any sense. Seriously, it didn't make any sense. And yet, here it was, mapped directly underneath the floor plan of the house that he'd grown up in, lost his brother in, been tortured in. Michael thought that he'd known his father, a prideful, sad, angry man with petty, everyday problems, but clearly he'd been living with a stranger this entire time. His father had secrets. Suddenly, the days of William being locked inside of his office made sense. He'd been here the entire time. Where was here, though? Was this Circus Baby's entertainment and rentals? The Circus Baby restaurant always did seem to be a deeply personal project for father. A failure of his that cut unusually deep, especially after that first location had to be closed prematurely due to the gas leaks. After that day, father really did seem to change, to lose himself even more in his work. Clearly, the entrance he had found was some sort of secret back way into the facility, one that required crawling through vents to navigate. His father had been working here, but in secret. Why? And that's when he found her. At the end of the facility, Circus Baby, his father's pride and joy. Except something was different about her. She wasn't like the others. The way she talked, the stories she told. This wasn't just a robot. She was alive somehow. And not only was she alive, she also felt familiar.
There is something bad inside of me. I'm broken. I can't be fixed. Will you help me?
Was this his sister? William's baby girl? But how? Why? What was this place? He dug around some old files and found blueprints outlining the features of these animatronics.
Imagine finding these blueprints with all this like evidence of bad stuff in them.
Stomach? Was his father collecting and experimenting on kids? Were all the rumors that he'd heard throughout his past actually true? That the animatronics came to life at night? That there were murders done in all the pizzerias? That his father had somehow been the
So like, if there's a child still in there, does that imply that their long gone body is just in there still? Bro kept corpses in them? That's weird.
In all of it.
That's messed
Michael's
up.
mind flashed back to his persistent nightmares throughout his childhood. Had he been experimented on too? Tears stung in his eyes as anger, fear, and confusion filled his body. His father's secrets were pouring out. William wasn't just a lame, overworked
thought about
father.
it like
he
that.
was a monster, toying with life itself. Suddenly, everything clicked. He frantically looked around the room, blinking human heads on poles staring back at him. Green eyes, his sister. Blue eyes, his brother. Closed eyes, his mom. All just staring, expectantly. These were meant to be human. William was working down here trying to make believable humans, literally rebuilding the family that they had both lost. The small little girl robots with their British accents roaming the hallways of this underground facility suddenly took on a whole new context.
That's still terrifying.
Were those meant to be his sister? A replacement for her? A clone? Was William building clones of his sister?
Bitty Babs are horrifying looking.
After all, to react to his presence.
They were all there. They didn't recognize me at first, but then they thought I was you.
He always did have a bit of a resemblance to his father. Michael's mind reeled as the reality of his world crumbled to dust. No, he had to get them out of there. If this really was his sister, heck, if any of these things were human, souls, whatever remnant of the humans that they once were, they needed to be rescued.
They always put us back inside. There's nowhere for us to hide here.
Led by the voice of Circus Baby, he marched through the now empty halls of the Funtime Auditorium. He would lead them. He would protect them. And finally, he would be able to forgive himself for the killing of his brother so many years.
Right when he gets scooped. That's crazy.
You are in the scooping room.
That is one crazy way to bring up the scooping stuff.
Only hurts for a moment.
Scooper, that violent extraction arm? Michael had seen that one in the pile of blueprints. Something about heat rendering the magical silver metal inside useless. In reality, prior to getting himself spring-locked and put behind the wall, William's methods had become increasingly sophisticated. With a mechanized arm that could infuse new bodies with a soul, William could finally give and take away life. The only thing he needed were the bodies. But William wasn't the only one looking for bodies, as Michael was about to learn.
But if we looked like you, then we could hide. If we looked like you, then we would have somewhere to go.
Michael was going to be the hero to help these animatronics, all right. He was going to help the haunted tubes and wires of these animatronics
Bro
escape.
really got
Just
fooled.
Not the way that he anticipated. His sister had lied to him. Another game of pretend. The scooper plowed forward, digging its extraction arm into his
Bro,
body.
imagine
As
a
he heard
game
his
of pretend
bones
from your
ripping through his
sisters, your
flesh.
soul and body not being able to
Something's
die.
wrong with me. I should be dead.
More than dead, really.
For the next several months, Michael's life was not his own. He was forced to comply with the tangle of wires and spirits that lived inside of him. His body felt like an overfilled balloon begging to burst as day by day, week by week, his flesh began to sag and discolor. He was a walking, talking, rotting corpse, alive, but wishing he wasn't. He was a puppet, a walking shell. And while he did his best to conceal his fate, there was only so much a man filled with robot spaghetti could do. The entity in his innards would eventually leave, but by that point, the damage had been done. His decaying
Bro's
flesh
really a
stank,
skin
turning him
suit
into a
now. That's
literal
crazy.
purple guy. But still, even with no bones, even with rotting purple flesh and begging to die, Michael continued to live. That silvery metal remnant injected by the scooper meant that he couldn't die. His anger also refused to die. What he had seen down there in his sister's location had rocked him to his core. His father had killed and captured dozens. His experiments had killed his sister and then tortured him throughout all his childhood. He was actively trying to build human replicants. He didn't know where his father was, but Michael knew that he was out there somewhere.
I've been living in shadows. There is only one thing left for me to do now. I'm going to come find
Bro got
you.
fired like
Michael had to
500
correct
times
the
for
sins of
his
father. He had to
dead
make
metal
things right.
smell
Michael
in his
would
body.
burn Fazbear Entertainment to the ground. I mean, what else could you do when your skin was permanently purple? Michael's strategy was simple. He would apply for night security guard positions at the old defunct pizzeria locations. That way, no one ever had to see him or smell him during his shift. And all these old shuttered locations.
Even MatPat's talking about the
Teenage
smell.
Vandals and squatters were always looking to get inside these abandoned buildings, and yet no one ever really wanted to work an overnight graveyard shift unless they were practically out of options. Enter Mike. One by one, he would take on the job of security guard, changing his name each time to ensure that no one was able to follow his paper
You
trail.
know, we should have thought about it before that a dead man would be working this shift. I mean, bro, this man is making $100 a week. He don't need to eat. Like, all he really needs to do is just pay rent. Or maybe not, since he's kind of living in shadows, living in the background, you know? But he didn't need to eat, because you aren't eating with $100 per week. You
Once
really
inside,
aren't.
He could tamper with the animatronics and figure out how they worked, writing about his experiences in his security logbook. While there, he would listen to the old tapes where
He'd
upper
always be
management
low on money.
awkwardly welcomed new recruits to their summer jobs, even though he was working there nowhere near the summer months. He heard the gory details of his father's franchise from the outsiders looking in, confused and afraid about what was happening in the walls around them. Sometimes he would see his brother in the form of the Golden Freddy suit. It's me appearing on the walls around him. Except now, there was something else there. He was no longer alone. Another angrier presence was also in the suit, as if two spirits were forced to share the same body. And Golden Freddy would attack him now. It was aggressive. Its vengeance wanted to lash out at anyone with the AFTON name, anyone who wore a security guard outfit. Over time, Mike worked his way through the old restaurants, the original pizzeria, the bigger, better Freddy Fazbear's. He spent weeks there looking for clues as to his father's whereabouts, and each time at the end of his week's shift, he would then set the location on fire. Remnant can't survive high temperatures after all. So burning away whatever spirit-laden animatronics that still existed inside seemed like a winning strategy. All this revisiting of his past, though, was causing the nightmares to begin again. Hallucinations that brought him back to his childhood. The guilt around killing his brother. His dreams were oddly mixed with the shrill phone calls of the security guards. But it would all be worth it in the end. The goal was to eventually stumble across the one location, the one job that would finally reunite him with his father.
Was that a tiny bit of a reference to FNAF 4 where you could hear the phone guy in the calls?
And Mike knew that that day would come sooner than he expected. 2023, an advertisement came across Mike's TV. Fazbear Frights, a new horror attraction inspired by the awful crimes that occurred around Freddy Fazbear's Pizza so many years ago. It made Mike sick.
What was that
People would
TV
make a quick buck off the tragedy
show
of others, off his
on
own
the screen
family.
right
This
there?
wasn't
What the
a
heck
Joe
was
Gore
that?
entertainment. Regardless, he had to be a part of it. If this team was combing through his family's history, they might stumble across something that could be
Top
useful.
secret
And if his
AFTON.
father was truly still alive as he suspected, there would be no way that he wouldn't show up here. Maybe finally this could be the final chapter in his family's marathon of tragedy. Mike applied for the job and was immediately handed the keys. Years of doing this had taught him that security guards rarely receive thorough security
Looks
checks.
human.
They also liked how creepy Mike looked. They thought it was a costume, on theme for the job. What little they knew.
Hey, glad you came back for another night. I promise it'll be a lot more interesting this time.
For weeks, there was nothing. But just as Mike considered giving up, he received the call that he'd been waiting for years.
You're not gonna believe this. We found one. A real one.
Could this finally be him? Sure enough, there he was. William inside his iconic golden Bonnie springlock suit, only now it was green and decaying with age. And there they were, a small family of broken men finally reunited. It's been a long time, Dad. Mike had always struggled with the phantoms of his past haunting him, but now all the animatronics he'd encountered over the past months, hopping from pizzeria
Forgot
to
what the
pizzeria,
phantom
suddenly
animatronics
sprang
looked
to life.
like.
Their burned
Or their
faces
jump
haunted him
scares.
as he tried to keep track of his father on the cameras. It would seem that William's mere presence had put the spirits on high alert. Ultimately, they were harmless, more annoying than anything else, but there was one that felt different from the others, one that was more than just a mere phantom, the security puppet. If he looked at the cameras at just the right moment, he could see it floating there through the halls. He could even see its reflection in the water pooled on the ground. It would seem like he wasn't the only one there on a mission. While he was dealing with Springtrap, Michael assumed that this one was likely dealing with the spirits of this place, finally setting them to rest. Hopefully this means a happier day for all of us, Mike thought to himself. And
happier
in that
day.
moment, he felt the
Happiest
air around
day.
him release, like pressure being let out of a bottle. The building sighed, as if 5 spirits had finally been allowed to move on. He had the sense that his brother was a part of them. He rigged the wiring inside the building to misfire, and the dry, desiccated walls erupted in flames. It is finished.
Well, it was
Except
supposed to be.
It was not. Somehow, through sheer force
Then
of
8 years
will,
later, here we are.
remained. He had
No,
survived.
5
and
years
Mike
later.
would need to find a new way of finishing off his father. Luckily, the solution
here
would
it would be
present
5 years, I
itself later
think.
that year. Not from Mike, but from another victim that had been left in his father's wake.
We're talking about becoming a Fazbear Entertainment franchisee. Restaurant ownership and management. Something almost anyone can do with a limited degree of success. You are now the face of the newly rebranded Freddy Fazbear's Pizza.
Fazbear Entertainment as a brand had been closed for years. William had been stuck in a suit and a wall. The only person who legally could bring the franchise back was Henry, but he'd largely pulled out of the franchise around the time of his father's disappearance. Something was up. Surely this had to be some kind of a trick, right? Mike, doing what
Be
he did
your
best,
own
applied
boss.
for a franchise and immediately got the job. There was just one thing out of the ordinary. Paragraph 4.
If you are playing this tape, that means
Paragraph
that
4.
not only have you been checking outside at the end of every shift, as you were instructed to do, but also that you
I like
have
how
found
Henry
something that
emphasizes
meets the
it with his
criteria of
voice.
Your special obligations under paragraph 4.
No employment contract he'd ever signed required him to keep special lookout for independently moving animatronics outside the restaurant. Now he knew something was up here. Henry was luring them all back. Rather than trying to go to them, like Mike had done for years, Henry was doing the opposite. He was putting them all under the same roof. He was finishing them off for good. Mike knew this wasn't meant to be a restaurant. It was meant to be a prison, a containment vessel, a locked box meant to trap them all in so they could finally end the madness. It took a few nights, but
It's like when you think about it too, it's like Michael spent all this time being tricked, led along, and now finally he gets to assist with the tricking.
eventually everyone was there. His father, the puppet, the robot spaghetti that had once violated his
Baby
body,
and Afton
his
got-
sister, now
got their,
hopelessly devoted to serve the man that had once gotten her killed. It
Got
was
their
time.
just
He had been
desserts.
instructed to seal the doors and leave, but while he locked everything down, he didn't move on. If this was truly meant to be the end, if the remnant needed to be washed away, he needed to be a part of that.
This is where your story ends. And to you, my brave volunteer, who somehow found this jobless...
Do y'all think FNAF really should have ended with this game?
There was a way out planned
With the
for it,
burning
I have
and
a
all that
feeling
stuff?
That's not what you want. I have a feeling that you are right where you want to be. And to you monsters trapped in the corridors, be still and give
Nah,
up
here
your
comes the
spirit.
best
They
line
don't
ever.
belong to you. For most of you, I believe there is peace and perhaps more waiting for
Here
you.
comes, here comes.
Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole. So don't keep the devil waiting, old friend.
And with that,
Like,
it was
oof.
over.
Like,
The
oof
Afton
indeed.
legacy died with all of them trapped inside of a literal
Like,
box.
the first time Henry said something in the series, it was that great one-liner to Afton. That was great.
Danced
He
around
didn't
the
need to be
office.
there.
Mike, for
He
the
just needed to
first
say
time
that
in
one
decades,
line.
Was happy, but William wasn't gone yet. Although the
For some
darkest pit of
reason,
hell was
for
open and
some
waiting for
reason.
him, something or someone wouldn't allow him to move on. Instead, he found himself locked in moments from his past. The pizzeria, his son's room, his underground bunker. It was as if his brain's neurons were all firing at once, overloaded, mixing and matching all his biggest fears, regrets, failures. What was this place? How did he get here? He called out into the silence.
Oh my god.
Then they started coming. Without warning, animatronics, both new and old,
Oh,
began
he used
to
the
jump out at
VHS,
him, bite him, rip him
that
limb
famous
from limb.
VHS
The
video.
pain was immeasurable. Make it stop. Make it stop. William, for the first time, longed for death, an end to this torture. Just as it felt like he couldn't take it anymore, everything was quiet again. It was as if the world had been reset. There was a brief moment of quiet, and then the onslaught began again. Dozens of faces from his past all focused on him. A waking nightmare that he couldn't escape from. More pain, more ripping. It was his own personal hell, but why? Why couldn't he just die? And then he saw them. A group of characters he never thought he'd see again. Those janky, stolen characters that had started everything. The mediocre melodies. It had all started to go wrong once they showed up. Once Henry had made them. But mixed in with their obnoxious southern drawls, William heard something else. It was barely a whisper, but he could just make out the words.
He tried to release you. He tried to release us. But I'm not gonna let
Like,
that
imagine
happen.
hearing that, and then next thing you know,
I will hold
back
you
right
here.
into the 15th
will
custom
keep you
night
here.
in a row.
No matter how many times they burn us.
That voice. He knew that voice, but from where?
Greetings from the fire, and from the one you should not have killed.
The one he shouldn't have killed.
Greetings from the
William.
fire.
He'd done a lot
That's
of awful
crazy.
things, but there was always the one that stood out. Not Charlie, his drunken act of revenge. Not Susie, his first true murder. No. Instead, it was the one that he had lost control with. The one that he had broken beyond repair for no good reason other than because he could. The one that he'd stuffed inside the golden bear that his partner used to wear. Cassidy. They were back, and now they were trying to punish him, to make him suffer like he'd made them suffer. It was almost like William and Cassidy's souls had been locked together, fused by a collective rage and spite, each refusing to move on. But while Cassidy was so focused on taking revenge, they actually did the one thing that would be the downfall for so many others. They kept William alive. Even though fire should have destroyed the remnant that was coursing through his being, Cassidy kept William breathing.
It's unfair,
paving the way
really,
for his
you know?
escape. William's will was
They have a
so
right to be
strong.
mad,
His
but
soul
being
so
mad kept him
powerful that he managed
alive.
to put a part of himself
So then he
inside
got
the
put into
circuit
a
board housed
weirder
in his
plot.
suit. And there, his consciousness lay, inside a single circuit board, waiting for someone to find him and set him free. A person that no one would suspect. Okay, so a bit of a shorter chunk, but an important one as we shift perspectives to Mike and tell his side of the story. And with FNAF VR, AR, and Security Breach having so much to explain, I didn't want to rush through things by trying to cram it all in here. Don't worry, I know you've all been patient. The final video is happening on March 25th. That is locked, it is getting ready to go. Trust me, I want this thing to be
March
over and done with as much as
25th.
you. I am not just stretching it out for the views. But before we wrap up for the day, I did
Yes,
want to talk about the big
that's after
orbital
next
elephant
week.
in the room, Mike's quest for revenge. You might have noticed that I was vague about the dates, and there's a good reason for that. I don't know them. There is no good way for me to make them fit in. Here's what I do know. We know with a high amount of
I
certainty
don't
that
know.
Michael Afton is the character that we play as up until Ultimate Custom Night. Mike Schmidt and Fritz Smith, the security guards for FNAF 1 and FNAF 2 respectively, get fired for, quote, tampering with the animatronics and odor. So weird connection between the two of them, right? But now, look at the phantom animatronics that are haunting us in FNAF 3. They use models from both FNAF 1 and FNAF 2, meaning whoever is sitting in that security guard chair, Fazbear Freitas, they have to have seen both locations and their animatronics. And that's not all. Their designs are burnt. It's a weird detail in the game, and it's something that the character
Burnt.
encyclopedia repeatedly calls attention to. The burned texture for these phantom animatronics.
Whoa.
Why is that so unusual, though?
I always thought they were just kind of doing that to, or Scott was doing that to make them more scary, since they're literally called phantoms, but I never knew that they were actually burned.
Fazbear Freitas is the first time in the franchise that we hear about
And I only say that because, like, I've never seen, you know, Chica burn, but I guess, maybe Chica was, I don't know.
burning down. From that point on in the story, it's like the characters turn pyro and are suddenly setting fires left and right. But for the first 3 games, nothing ever catches fire. The animatronics are just moved or repurposed in some way. So when did they burn? And why would our security guards see them as being burned? Someone has to have been going location to location, setting these places on fire, purging the sins of the past. We know we're definitely
Because I've never seen Chica burn. Like, what the hell?
6 based on the in-game dialogue. And in FNAF 4, there's an Easter egg where we can hear the phone call from Night 1 of FNAF 1, meaning that whoever's in that bedroom has heard the recording as a security guard. We also know that Mike has seen the nightmare animatronics based on his drawings in the security logbook. So overall, there is solid evidence that connects all of FNAFs 1 through 6. You'll also notice how the character encyclopedia doesn't have a page for Mike Afton. This thing has a page for Chocolate Bunny Bonnie, but not Michael? Some tells me they don't want us to confirm how many games he's been in, because that would confirm too much of the theory. In short,
What?
this gives us an incredibly compelling and complete narrative. Mike
That's
as our
crazy.
protagonist, and William, his father, as our antagonist.
Not once we don't see Mike,
accidentally
huh?
kills his brother in Fredbear's mouth, which begins our story and sets William down.
So you're telling me FNAF fans gotta wait for a whole new encyclopedia with like 1,000 pages in it just so Michael can show up? That is insane.
Pathway of destruction. Mike is then haunted by the guilt of his past and is looking to make things right across the rest of the games. In Sister Location, he learns what his father's been up to and realizes what he has to do to correct it. After failing to finish the job in FNAF 3, he ultimately helps Henry end it all in FNAF 6. It is great. It is a clean narrative. There is just one problem: timing. Mike's quest can't really start until he's been down to Sister Location, seen baby, and gotten himself scooped. That's when he finds out about AFTON's secret life. It's also when he's gonna start to smell, because, you know, he's a walking, talking, rotting corpse. And we know that he's not going down into the bunker until the Funtime animatronics have been made, Freddy's has been closed, and AFTON is out of the picture. That all should be happening post-1993, after William is sealed behind a wall. But that then presents us with a few problems. AFTON has already dismantled the original animatronics as we see in the FNAF 3 minigames. How are those things getting burned if they're already deconstructed? But more importantly, we see FNAF 2 paychecks with the date 1987. That is way earlier than I think it can be. To be fair, Fritz Smith's pink slip on night 7 doesn't have a date, but it's a bit weird to say that the first few nights are in 1987 and then employee number 3 is hired on years after the restaurant closes. Anyway, just wanted to call that out because I don't have a solid answer for it, and I'd love to see your comments down below. And with that, my friends, this chapter comes to a close. We'll see you on March 25th for the grand finale as we cover the
Hopefully
final
we get
3
a
games of the
book that
franchise and the
puts the timeline in the perspective.
We're trying to tell us. Until then, my Faz heads, remember,
Faz heads, that's new.
Kinda succeeded in being brought back to life. Gotta admit, he's still looking a little bit on the dry, dehydrated side. I suppose 3 fires and being dead for a decade.
What is this, coldest water?
Fortunately, thanks to today's
Oh no, air up. Okay. All right. I knew something was coming. All right, if you guys want more, wait, more when the final one's coming out next week. If you guys want me to react to the final one of this, make sure you guys hit that like button, comment down below, subscribe for more too, become a Kister today, and I will see you guys later. Peace out. And make sure you guys go check out my other reactions to these timeline videos that MapHat's been making, what his theories and what we know.